The deepest mysteries of the lands between stretch back to a time before the Erdtree, hinting at cosmic entities and ancient civilizations whose influence still subtly shapes the present. And yet, even after millions of players have scoured every catacomb, decoded every item description, and pieced together fragments of lore scattered across a shattered world, there remain secrets that refuse to yield their meaning, questions that linger in the silence between boss fights, and details so carefully hidden that they seem to exist in a realm between intention and accident. This is not simply a story about a video game with unanswered questions. This is a story about how a single work of interactive fiction became an archaeological site, a text so dense with layered mythology and deliberate obscurity that it has generated years of investigation, debate, and obsessive scrutiny from a community that refuses to let any stone remain unturned, any symbol unexamined, any line of dialogue taken at face value. From the moment Elden Ring released in February 2022, it was clear that FromSoftware and George R. Martin had constructed something different, a world where the answers were not simply hidden, but fragmented, contradictory, and in some cases possibly non existent, where the line between intentional mystery and interpretive freedom blurred into something that felt less like a narrative puzzle and more like a living mythology, one that grows and shifts with each new theory, each discovered connection, each realization that what seemed like environmental storytelling might be something far stranger. The scale of what remains unknown is staggering. There are entire quest lines that seem to lead nowhere, NPCs whose motivations dissolve into incoherence, locations that serve no mechanical purpose and yet are rendered with painstaking detail, item descriptions that reference events and entities never explained elsewhere, visual motifs repeated across centuries of in-world history with no clear through line, and mechanical systems that hint at cut content, change direction, or secrets so deeply embedded that they may take years more to surface. Some mysteries are grand and cosmological, questions about the nature of the greater will, the true identity of the gloam-eyed queen, the purpose of the divine towers, the relationship between the outer gods, the meaning of Miquella's unalloyed gold, and what exactly happened in the time before time when the world was formless and everything was blended together in the crucible. Others are small, almost trivial, the kind of details that only matter to those who have spent hundreds of hours in this world and have begun to notice the inconsistencies, the objects placed in strange locations, the duplicated character models, the dialogue that changes based on factors no one has fully mapped, the phantom NPCs who appear and vanish, the items that reference each other in circular logic, the architectural impossibilities, the genealogies that do not quite add up. And then there are the mysteries that exist in the space between the game and its creation, questions about what was intended versus what was implemented, what was cut versus what was hidden, what is a clue versus what is simply the residue of a development process that spanned years and involved countless revisions, compromises, and changes of direction. The community that has formed around these mysteries is itself a phenomenon worth examining, a collective of lore archaeologists, data miners, speedrunners, challenge runners, and obsessive players who have turned the game inside out, who have found ways to break the world open and peer into its hidden structures, who have compiled spreadsheets and wikis and video essays and forum threads that stretch into the thousands of pages, all in service of answering questions that may not have answers, or whose answers may be less satisfying than the questions themselves. This is the paradox at the heart of Elden Ring's mysteries. The game is designed to resist total comprehension, to maintain a sense of the unknown even after everything has been cataloged, and yet the human impulse is to solve, to understand, to impose order on chaos, to find the pattern in the noise. What happens when an unstoppable force of curiosity meets an immovable object of intentional obscurity? What happens when the mysteries are the point, when the not knowing is the experience the creators intended, and yet the community cannot help but try to know anyway? The result is a strange kind of collaborative storytelling, where the official lore and the fan theories, and the data mined content, and the personal interpretations all blend together into something that exists beyond any single source, a mythology that is both discovered and invented, both revealed and imagined. And within this vast ecosystem of mystery and interpretation, there are some secrets that stand apart, questions so fundamental or so strange that they have become legendary within the community, mysteries that have resisted every attempt at solution, that have generated dozens of competing theories, that have been declared solved only to be reopened when new evidence emerges or old assumptions are challenged. These are the mysteries that keep players returning to the lands between, long after they have defeated every boss, collected every item, and seen every ending. The mysteries that transform a finite game into an infinite text. The mysteries that ensure that even years after release, there are still discoveries to be made, connections to be drawn, and secrets waiting in the shadows. To understand any of it, we have to go back to the very beginning, not to the beginning of the game itself, but to the beginning of the world it depicts, to the primordial era before the Erdtree rose, before the Golden Order was established, before Marika became a god, to a time when the lands between were something else entirely, when the rules were different, when the cosmic forces that would later shape the age of the Erdtree were still competing for dominance, still establishing the patterns that would echo through millennia, still leaving traces that would one day become the clues that players would spend years trying to decipher. This is where the first mysteries begin, in the deep past, in the age of the Crucible, when all life was blended together, when the distinction between species and forms had not yet hardened, when the world was molten and mutable, and the outer gods were not yet locked into their eternal struggle. The Crucible is mentioned in item descriptions, depicted in incantations, referenced in the designs of ancient armor and weapons, and yet its true nature remains elusive, described in metaphors and fragments, never fully explained, never given a definitive origin or purpose. Was it a place, a force, a being, an era, or something that transcends these categories? The game does not say, and perhaps cannot say, because the Crucible exists before language, before categorization, before the order that would later be imposed by the Erdtree and its Golden Order. And alongside the Crucible, there are other primordial forces, other outer gods and cosmic entities whose influence can be traced through the ages, but whose nature remains fundamentally alien, fundamentally unknowable. The Formless Mother, who grants power through blood, and before the Golden Order, before the Erdtree rose to dominate the skyline of the lands between, before Marika's ascension and the establishment of the age we know, there existed something far older, far stranger, and infinitely more primal. In this ancient era, long before recorded history began, the world was shaped by forces that modern scholars can barely comprehend. This is the age of origins, where the very fabric of life itself took forms unrecognizable to those who would come after. At the heart of this primordial world stood the crucible, sometimes called the primordial crucible. This was not the Erdtree as you see it in the game, that towering golden beacon of order and grace. Instead, the crucible represented something fundamentally different. It was a melting pot of existence, a churning cauldron where all life blended together without distinction or separation. In the crucible, there were no clear boundaries between species, no defined categories of plant and animal, no hierarchy of being. Everything that lived drew from the same undifferentiated source, and that source pulsed with raw, chaotic vitality. The aspects we now consider monstrous, the wings of beasts, the tails of reptiles, the horns of creatures long extinct, these were not aberrations in the age of the crucible. They were simply expressions of life in its purest, most unrefined state. The nature of the crucible becomes clearer when you examine the crucible knights, those ancient warriors who served the Erdtree in its earliest incarnation. These knights, unlike the Golden Order fundamentalists who would come later, did not see the bestial aspects as impure or shameful. They embraced them. Through their connection to the crucible's power, these warriors manifested physical transformations that modern society would deem monstrous. Some sprouted wings, actual functional appendages that allowed brief flight. Others grew tails, thick and powerful, capable of sweeping aside enemies. The Crucible Knight Ordovis and his companion, Crucible Knight Siluria, stand as testaments to this ancient tradition, their armor designed to accommodate these animalistic features, their combat styles incorporating movements that no ordinary human could achieve. They fought not despite these mutations, but because of them, channeling the Crucible's raw strength directly into their bodies. The incantations they wielded tell us even more about this era. Aspects of the Crucible, the spells that allow you to temporarily manifest horns, tail, or breath attacks. These are described as vestiges of the Erdtree's primordial form. The fact that these powers are now considered primitive, even heretical by some in the Golden Order, speaks volumes about how drastically perspectives shifted. What was once the highest blessing became over time a mark of something to be hidden or suppressed. But the crucible was not the only power that shaped this ancient world. In the void beyond mortal comprehension, there existed entities that scholars now call outer gods. These beings operated on scales and through mechanisms that defy easy understanding, but their influence on the physical world was undeniable. Among them was the Formless Mother, an entity intrinsically tied to blood and the experience of pain. Unlike the Crucible's emphasis on blended life, the Formless Mother represented something darker, more visceral. Her power flowed through blood itself, and those who sought her favor engaged in practices of ritual wounding and bloodletting. The Formless Mother's influence would not become widely known until much later, when figures like Mog would actively seek her power, but her existence predates even the Crucible. She dwelt in a space described as formless, as a void where conventional reality held no sway. The blood incantations associated with her worship speak of wounds that never heal, of blood that burns with unnatural heat, of pain transformed into power. In this ancient era, before the Golden Order's rigid structures, the formless mother's presence was simply one more fundamental force shaping reality, neither good nor evil in any conventional sense, but primal and absolute. The fire giants, those massive beings who would eventually face genocide at Marika's hands, worshipped their own deity in this primordial age. The Fell God, a fiery entity of immense power, was no mere idol or false god. Evidence suggests this being possessed genuine divine authority, commanding flames that could burn away the very concept of order itself. The fire giants, towering beings with red hair and immense strength, tended the flame of ruin atop the mountain tops of the giants. This was not ordinary fire. It was flame imbued with the power to burn the Erdtree itself, a fact that would later drive Marika to near genocidal extremes in her efforts to eliminate this threat. The Fell God's existence raises profound questions about the nature of divinity in the lands between. If multiple gods could exist simultaneously, each with their own domains and worshippers, then the Golden Order's later claims to universal truth become far more suspect. The fire giants did not simply believe in their god. They served as living conduits for its power, their bodies marked by a single massive eye embedded in their torsos, a feature that suggests a fundamental transformation or blessing from their deity. Death itself worked differently in this ancient time. The twin bird, a mysterious entity aligned with the forces of death, was revered by cultures whose names have been lost to history. Unlike the Golden Order's later attempts to control and suppress death through the sealing of destined death, the twin bird represented a more natural cycle. Life flowed into death, and death in turn fed new life. The ghost flame incantations and the practices of ancient death birds point to a time when death was not feared or denied, but accepted as an essential part of existence. These death birds, massive spectral creatures that still haunt certain locations in the lands between, served as psychopomps, guiding souls in their transition from life to whatever came after. The twin bird, their progenitor or patron, embodied this liminal state. The sorceries and incantations associated with ghost flame, that eerie purple fire that burns spirit rather than flesh, derive from these ancient practices. They represent an understanding of death that the Golden Order would later seek to erase entirely. Beneath the surface world, in the depths that few ever see, lies evidence of something even older than the Crucible. The deep-root depths, a vast subterranean realm, contains the roots of what some scholars call the Great Tree. These roots, massive beyond comprehension, predate the Erdtree's current golden form. They suggest that the primordial crucible itself grew from something even more ancient, a life force so fundamental that it literally underpinned the physical world. The crucible's influence manifested in various forms throughout the lands between, and perhaps none were more tragic than the Omen. These beings bore physical traits reminiscent of primordial life itself, their bodies adorned with horns, twisted appendages, and growths that recalled the chaotic blending of all life that characterized the crucible's essence. The Omen were not a separate species, but rather individuals born with these crucible traits, appearing among what would later become the dominant populations of the lands between. Their very existence served as living proof that the crucible's power had not vanished, but merely lay dormant, capable of reasserting itself in each new generation. The horns that sprouted from omen bodies grew in unpredictable patterns, some curling like ram's horns, others branching like coral or antlers. These growths were not merely cosmetic, they carried within them the raw vitality of the crucible itself, which is why they would later be cut and harvested, their inherent power recognized even as the beings who bore them were reviled. The omen represented an uncomfortable truth for those who would later seek to establish order and hierarchy, that the primordial chaos could never be fully extinguished, that it lived on in the blood and bone of the world's inhabitants. Far to the north, in the frozen peaks that would come to be known as the mountain tops of the giants, another ancient power held dominion. The fire giants, and towering beings of immense strength and endurance, maintained their worship of the fell god, a deity of flame and destruction whose true nature remained shrouded in mystery. These giants were not mere primitives, but the keepers of a sacred duty, tending to the flame of ruin, a destructive force of such terrible potency that it was said to be capable of burning even the Erdtree itself. The flame of ruin was no ordinary fire. It burned with a red-orange intensity that spoke to something fundamental and inescapable, a power that existed as a counterbalance to life and growth. The fire giants fed this flame in a massive forge, a structure so vast that it dominated the landscape of their mountain home. Their worship was not born of cruelty or nihilism, but of a deep understanding that destruction was as necessary to the cosmos as creation. The fell god they served was said to possess a single great eye, and the giants themselves bore a similar eye upon their torsos, marking them as the chosen servants of this ancient power. This flame represented a threat to any order that might arise, for it promised that no matter how permanent or eternal something claimed to be, fire could reduce it to ash. In the skies above and in the hidden places of the world, another ancient influence made itself known through the twin bird, an entity associated with death in its most primal form. The twin bird's influence led to the creation of the death birds, spectral entities that embodied the ancient concept of death and rebirth that existed before the Golden Order would attempt to seal death away entirely. These death birds were gaunt, skeletal creatures, wreathed in ghostly flames, wielding the power of ghost flame, a cold fire that burned black and white rather than red and orange. This ghost flame represented death not as an ending, but as a transformation, a return to the primordial state from which new life might emerge. The deathbirds served as psychopomps of a sort, guardians of the boundary between life and death, when that boundary was still permeable and natural. They nested in places of death and gathered in cemeteries and burial grounds, drawn to the sites where the living became the dead. The twin bird itself was said to be a being of dual nature, embodying both the moment of death and the potential for rebirth, and its servants carried this duality in their very essence. Their existence would later be suppressed and forgotten, but in this ancient age, they were simply another part of the natural order, as accepted as birth or growth. Beneath the surface of the lands between, in the deepest places where light rarely penetrated, lay the deep-root depths, a vast subterranean realm that served as a foundational layer of the world itself. Here, the roots of the great tree, that massive arboreal structure that preceded the Erdtree, intertwined with ancient life in ways that blurred the distinction between plant and animal, between living and dead. The deep root depths were not merely caves or tunnels, but a living network, a place where the roots themselves seemed to breathe and pulse with vitality. Water flowed through these depths, not the clear water of mountain streams, but something thicker, more vital, carrying nutrients and life force throughout the root system. Ancient creatures dwelled in these depths, some resembling the life forms that walked the surface, others so bizarre and primordial that they defied easy categorization. The roots themselves grew to enormous size, some as thick as castle walls, and they created chambers and passages that formed a kind of natural architecture. This was a place of profound stillness and slow growth, where time moved differently than on the surface, where the fundamental processes of life, the drawing of nutrients, the slow expansion of living tissue, the patient accumulation of strength, could be observed in their purest form. The deep root depths represented the foundation upon which everything else was built, the literal and metaphorical roots of the world. Even as these various powers shaped the ancient world, another influence began to make itself felt, something darker and more visceral than the crucible's chaotic vitality. The formless mother, an outer god whose nature was intimately connected with blood and wounds, began to manifest her influence through the creation of blood flame, a corrupting and painful power that represented not the vitality of blood, but its loss, its spilling, the agony of wounds that would not heal. Blood flame burned with a deep crimson intensity, and unlike normal fire or even the ghost flame of the death birds, it inflicted not just physical damage, but a kind of spiritual corruption, a pain that went beyond the body. The formless mother's power was intimately connected with the concept of wounding, with the idea that through pain and blood loss, one might achieve a kind of transcendence or communion with something greater. This was not the natural cycle of predator and prey, not the clean death of the hunt, but something more disturbing, a celebration of suffering itself. Those who would later become her devotees would pierce their own flesh repeatedly, seeking to maintain a state of constant bleeding, believing that through their wounds they could feel her presence. In this ancient age, her influence was just beginning to seep into the world, finding those who were drawn to pain and blood, whispering promises of power through suffering. The ancient inhabitants of the lands between lived in a world profoundly different from what would come later. The boundaries between life and death were more fluid here, more permeable, as death was not an ending, but a transformation, a return to the primordial soup of the crucible from which new forms might emerge. Similarly, the boundaries between different forms of life were less rigid. The crucible's influence meant that life could take unexpected forms, that beings might possess traits from multiple species, that the categories and hierarchies that would later define the Golden Order simply did not exist. This was a world of raw possibility, where the fundamental forces of existence, life, death, fire, blood, growth, as decay, operated without the constraints that would later be imposed upon them. It was a world that would seem chaotic and frightening to those who came later, but to those who lived in it, it was simply the natural state of things. Yet even this primordial age could not last forever. The crucible's power, so vital and creative, was eventually suppressed and refined by the nascent Golden Order. As the primordial crucible continued its endless churning of life, the lands between entered what scholars now call the Dragon Age. an epoch so ancient that even the Erdtree itself was not yet a seed in the cosmic consciousness. This was the age when the ancient dragons held absolute dominion over the world, when their scales glittered like living stone beneath skies that had never known the golden light of the Erdtree's grace. The ancient dragons were not mere beasts, not the lesser drakes and worms that would populate later eras. These were beings of cosmic significance, creatures whose very existence seemed woven from the fundamental forces of reality itself. Their stone scales were not simply armor, but appeared to be a unique form of matter, neither fully organic nor entirely mineral, a substance that defied the conventional boundaries between living flesh and eternal stone. At the apex of this draconic hierarchy stood Dragon Lord Placidusax, a being of such immense power and majesty that his name alone would echo through the ages, long after his reign had crumbled into myth. Placidusax was no ordinary dragon. He possessed not two heads, as you might expect, but five, each one crowned with horns that seemed to pierce the very fabric of space itself. This multi-headed sovereign ruled from Farum Azula, a structure that even in the Dragon Age was already ancient, a floating temple city that defied gravity and logic in equal measure. The architecture of Farum Azula speaks to an understanding of reality that transcends mortal comprehension, its stones held aloft by forces that modern scholars can only guess at. Some theorize it was the power of the dragons themselves that kept the city suspended in the sky. Others suggest that Farum Azula exists partially outside of time, anchored to reality by threads so delicate that the city seems to flicker between existence and memory. What makes Placidusax particularly fascinating to those who study the deep history of the lands between is that he served as Elden Lord to an outer god, a cosmic entity whose identity remains one of the most tantalizing mysteries in all of Elden Ring lore. The outer gods, for those unfamiliar with this concept, are entities that exist beyond the physical realm of the lands between, cosmic forces that seek to impose their order or disorder upon the world through chosen vessels and intermediaries. The greater will, which would later establish the Golden Order and the Erdtree, is perhaps the most famous of these outer gods, but it was far from the first to take interest in the lands between. The god that Placidusax served predates the greater will's dominion entirely. We know this because, when we encounter Placidusax in his current state, he lies in a timeless slumber, waiting eternally for the return of his god, a deity that has fled or abandoned the lands between entirely. The architecture and iconography of Farum Azula contain no references to the Erdtree, no golden light, no symbols of the greater will's influence. Instead, the temple city is adorned with imagery of storms and lightning, of wind and sky, suggesting that Placidusax's god may have been associated with these primal forces. The relationship between Placidusax's vanished god and the greater will remains a subject of intense speculation. Some scholars argue that the greater will was simply the next cosmic entity to claim dominion after Placidusax's god departed, a successor in an endless cycle of divine rulership. Others propose a more dramatic interpretation that the greater will actively displaced or defeated Placidusax's god in some cosmic conflict beyond mortal comprehension, establishing its own order atop the ruins of the dragon god's reign. Evidence for this theory can be found in the very state of Farum Azula itself, which exists in a condition of temporal decay, crumbling across multiple points in time simultaneously, as if it had been struck by a weapon that damaged not just stone, but the very flow of time around the structure. When you eventually encounter Placidusax, you find him with only 4 of his 5 heads remaining. The stumps of the lost head suggesting a wound of cosmic proportions, perhaps inflicted during whatever cataclysm ended his god's reign. The ancient dragon's rule established patterns and precedents that would shape the lands between for eons to come. Their dominion was absolute, but not necessarily tyrannical. The dragons seemed to view themselves as the natural apex of existence, the ultimate expression of what life could become when touched by cosmic power. This era, remember, still existed in close proximity to the primordial crucible, and the ancient dragons may have represented one of the crucible's most successful experiments, beings in which all forms of life blended into a perfect, eternal synthesis of power and majesty. Their stone scales, their command of lightning that could split the sky, their apparent immortality, all of these qualities suggested that the ancient dragons had achieved something close to perfection within the crucible's chaotic design. It was during this age that humans first began to understand that power could be taken from dragons, that their strength was not solely their own, but could be claimed, consumed, transformed into mortal might. Thus began the practice known as dragon communion, a ritual both sacred and profane, in which the hearts of slain dragons were consumed by mortals seeking to transcend their limitations. The act of dragon communion was not simple cannibalism or mere sustenance. When a mortal consumed a dragon's heart, they absorbed a fragment of that dragon's essential nature, gaining the ability to channel draconic power, to breathe flames or summon lightning, to temporarily touch the cosmic might that the ancient dragons wielded as naturally as breathing. Dragon hearts were repositories of pure elemental force, organs that contained not just biological matter, but condensed power from the age when dragons ruled supreme. However, dragon communion came with a terrible price. The power was real, undeniable, intoxicating, but it corrupted those who partook of it. Mortals who consumed too many dragon hearts began to transform, their bodies twisting and changing, scales erupting from their skin, their minds fracturing under the weight of draconic consciousness. They became magma worms, tragic creatures trapped between human and dragon, possessing neither the intelligence of their former selves nor the majesty of true dragons. These twisted beings would haunt the lands between for ages to come, living warnings of the danger inherent in reaching for power beyond one's station. The transformation was irreversible, a one-way journey into monstrosity that began with ambition and ended in exile and madness. Yet despite this known corruption, the lure of draconic power proved too strong for many to resist. Parallel to the practice of dragon communion arose the dragon cult, a more formalized religious movement that approached dragons not as prey to be hunted and consumed, but as divine beings worthy of worship and emulation. The Glomide Queen's power grew to terrifying heights during this period, her mastery over the rune of death granting her the ability to slay gods themselves. Where the ancient dragons had once been the apex predators of the lands between, the Glomide Queen and her black flame-wielding followers represented something far more dangerous, an existential threat to immortality itself. The black flame that her godskin apostles commanded was not merely destructive fire. It was flame imbued with the essence of destined death, capable of killing that which should not die. Gods, demigods, and champions alike fell before this power. The very concept of permanence, of eternal rule, became uncertain. The godskin apostles would hunt their divine prey, and after the kill, they would perform their grotesque ritual, flaying the skin from their victims and wearing it as a twisted trophy. These skins were then sewn together into robes and garments, each one a testament to a fallen god. The practice was not merely sadistic, it served a purpose within their faith, a way of claiming dominion over divinity itself by literally wearing its remains. The threat posed by the gloam-eyed queen could not be ignored by those who sought to establish a new order in the lands between. Queen Marika the Eternal, who would come to rule the age that followed, recognized that the rune of death had to be controlled if her golden order was to endure. To accomplish this task, she turned to a being of exceptional loyalty and ferocity. Malekith, the Black Blade, was born during this ancient era, though the exact circumstances of his origin remain shrouded in mystery. What is known is that he was a shadow-bound beast, a half-wolf creature of immense power who was destined from birth to serve Marika. The bond between Marika and Malekith was not one of mere political alliance. It was something deeper, a connection that transcended the normal relationships between ruler and servant. Malekith was Marika's shadow, her protector, her weapon against those who would threaten her ascension. Marika entrusted Malekith with a task of unparalleled importance. She granted him the rune of death itself, or at least the authority to wield and safeguard it. This was not a gift given lightly. The rune of death was perhaps the most dangerous force in existence, and placing it in the hands of any being was a calculated risk. But Marika understood Malekith's nature. His loyalty was absolute, his dedication unwavering. He would guard the rune with his life, and more importantly, he would use it only as she commanded. Malekith became the sole keeper of destined death, the only being authorized to wield its power. This appointment fundamentally altered the balance of power in the world. No longer would death be a wild, uncontrolled force. It would be leashed, directed, controlled by Marika's will through her most faithful servant. The confrontation between Malekith and the gloam-eyed queen was inevitable. Two wielders of death, two philosophies of mortality, could not coexist. The details of their battle have been lost to time, but the outcome is recorded in the very fabric of the world. Malekith defeated the gloam-eyed queen in combat, a victory that required all of his considerable strength and the full power of the rune of death. But victory alone was not enough. The gloam-eyed queen had to be more than defeated. She had to be neutralized permanently, her power over death stripped away so thoroughly that she could never again threaten the coming age. Malekith accomplished this by sealing the rune of death within his own blade, binding destined death so tightly that it became inseparable from his weapon. The blade itself came to be known as Gurunk, or perhaps Malekith took on the name Gurunk as a second identity, a disguise he would use in ages to come. The sealing was complete. The black flame that had burned with the power to kill gods was reduced to mere memory, its practitioners scattered and hunted. The defeat of the gloam-eyed queen marked a seismic shift in the power structures of the lands between. For the first time, death itself had been conquered, not through avoidance or immortality, but through absolute control. the Godskin apostles who had served the Glomide queen found themselves without a leader, their sacred mission interrupted. Some went into hiding, preserving their techniques and their faith in secret places, waiting for a time when destined death might return to the world. Others were hunted down and destroyed by those loyal to the emerging Golden Order. The black flame became forbidden knowledge, its practice heretical. The very mention of the gloam-eyed queen would in later ages be suppressed, her existence reduced to whispers and fragments of half-remembered history. But the consequences of her defeat extended far beyond the fate of her followers. The ancient dragons, who had weathered so many challenges to their supremacy, found their power beginning to wane in the aftermath of the Rune of Death's sealing. The exact mechanism of this decline is not entirely clear, but several factors likely contributed. With death itself bound and controlled, the natural cycle that had sustained the dragons was disrupted. Dragons are inherently tied to the concept of eternity, their stone scales representing permanence itself. But permanence without the counterbalance of mortality creates stagnation. Additionally, the sealing of destined death may have cut the ancient dragons off from certain fundamental forces they had relied upon. Placidusax, the great Elden Lord of the Dragons, found his authority challenged not by direct combat, but by the changing nature of reality itself. The age that had belonged to dragons was drawing to a close, not with a dramatic battle, but with a slow, inexorable transformation of the world's underlying rules. Into the void left by the dragon's decline, something new began to grow. The Erdtree, which would come to define the next age entirely, started its growth during this transitional period. The great golden tree did not spring up overnight. Its earliest growth was likely modest, perhaps even unnoticed by many, but it carried within it the promise of a new order, a new source of power and legitimacy. The Erdtree was more than a tree. It was a physical manifestation of the greater will's influence in the lands between, a beacon of gold that would eventually tower over all other landmarks. As it grew, it drew power from the land itself, its roots spreading deep, its branches reaching toward the heavens. The light it cast was golden and warm, a stark contrast to the cold stone of dragon architecture and the terrifying black flame of the Godskin cult. Meanwhile, in the crumbling ruins of Farum Azula, Placidusax made a choice that would define his fate for ages to come. Rather than fight against the inevitable decline of dragon supremacy, rather than rage against the changing world, the great Elden Lord entered a state of waiting. He positioned himself at the heart of Farum Azula, the seat of ancient dragon power, and there he remained patient and eternal. Placidusax awaited the return of his outer god, the entity that had granted the dragons their original authority and power. Whether this god had abandoned the dragons, been defeated, or simply withdrawn is unknown. But Placidusax's faith never wavered. He would wait, through ages and eons if necessary, for the return of his lord. His multiple heads, which may have numbered more in ancient times before some were lost to battle or time, remained alert even in his timeless vigil. The storm that perpetually raged around Farum Azula seemed to exist outside normal time, and within that storm, Placidusax waited, a monument to loyalty and a remnant of an age that had passed. Following the decline of the ancient dragons and the fading of their stone-scaled dominion over the lands between, a new age was about to dawn. The Age of Plenty, as some would later call it, began with the rise of a single figure whose influence would reshape reality itself. This was the era of the Golden Order's foundation, a time when the very laws governing life and death would be rewritten by divine mandate. Queen Marika the Eternal, an Empyrean, emerged as the chosen vessel of the greater will during this transformative period. To understand Marika's significance, you must first understand what it means to be an Empyrean. An Empyrean is a being selected by the two fingers, those enigmatic emissaries of the greater will, as a candidate to become a god. Not merely a ruler or a powerful sorcerer, but a true god capable of hosting an outer god's power and establishing a new order of reality. Marika was not born into divinity. She was chosen for it, plucked from her origins, which remain shrouded in mystery and contradiction. Some fragments suggest she came from the lands of the Numen, a race of long-lived people from outside the lands between. Others whisper of a village called the Shaman Village, a place of profound suffering that may have forged her iron will. The greater will, that most supreme of the outer gods, saw in Marika the perfect instrument for its vision. Through the guidance of the two fingers and the machinations of powers beyond mortal comprehension, Marika ascended. She became the vessel for the Elden Ring itself, that fundamental ordering principle of reality. The Elden Ring is not merely a physical object, though it can manifest as one. It is the embodiment of order, a collection of great runes that together define the laws of the world. Life, death, causality, fate, all these concepts flow from the Elden Ring's structure. When Marika became its vessel, she did not simply hold power. She became the living avatar of the world's natural laws, her body the container for divinity itself. But Marika's ascension was not a peaceful coronation. The path to absolute power demanded the elimination of rivals, and the greatest threat to the nascent Golden Order was the gloam-eyed Queen. This mysterious figure, also an Empyrean, commanded the Godskin Apostles, a terrifying cult that wielded the power of destined death itself. The gloam-eyed Queen's order stood in direct opposition to everything Marika would build. Where Marika would establish eternal life under the Erdtree's grace, the gloam-eyed Queen embraced the natural cycle of death, even for gods. Her followers hunted and slew divine beings, flaying their skin to wear as trophies and proof of their blasphemous victories. The weapon of the Godskin Apostles was the Black Flame, a manifestation of destined death's power. This was no ordinary fire. The Black Flame could kill anything, reducing even immortal flesh to ash. It burned with the authority of true death, the kind of death that permits no resurrection, no return, no grace given second chance. The god-slaying black flame represented everything the greater will sought to suppress, a power that acknowledged no hierarchy, no divine right, no eternal rule. Marika's war against the gloam-eyed queen was existential. If the gloam-eyed queen had prevailed, the world would have remained subject to death's ultimate authority. Gods would be as mortal as men, vulnerable to the black flame's judgment. But Marika, wielding the full might of the Elden Ring, emerged victorious. The details of their final confrontation are lost to time, but the outcome reshaped the cosmos. Marika defeated the gloam-eyed queen utterly, and in doing so, she seized control of destined death itself. Destined death, also called the Rune of Death, was the great rune that governed true mortality. With this rune active and free, all things could die permanently, gods included. Marika understood that her golden order could never achieve stability while such a power existed uncontrolled. So she did something unprecedented. She removed the rune of death from the Elden Ring entirely, fundamentally altering the structure of reality. She then entrusted this extracted rune to her shadow, Malekith, a loyal beast of fearsome power who would guard it for all eternity. Sealed away within Malekith, bound by unbreakable oaths, destined death was removed from the world. The consequences of this act rippled through every corner of existence. The god-slaying black flame, once capable of killing anything, was stripped of its true power. The godskin apostles, who survived Marika's purge, found their sacred fire reduced to a shadow of its former self. The black flame still burned, still inflicted grievous wounds, but it could no longer deliver true death. It became a mere echo, a memory of the power it once held. The godskins themselves were scattered, their cult broken, forced to lurk in forgotten corners of the world, clinging to rituals that no longer held their original meaning. With destined death sealed away, Marika established the Erdtree as the central symbol and source of her new order. The Erdtree, that immense golden tree visible from every corner of the lands between, became more than a landmark. It was the physical manifestation of the Golden Order itself, a beacon of grace that promised eternal life to those who lived according to its tenets. The Erdtree's roots reached deep into the earth, drawing sustenance from the very essence of the world. Its branches stretched toward the heavens, a bridge between mortal and divine. Within the Erdtree, souls would return after death, not to face oblivion, but to be recycled, reborn, granted new life under the Order's eternal cycle. The Golden Order's tenets were established during this foundational period, a set of principles that would govern civilization for ages to come. Chief among these was the denial of destined death. Death, in the Golden Order's view, was not an ending but a transition. Those who died would return to the Erdtree, their essence preserved, their consciousness eventually reborn. This was the gift of grace, the golden light that marked those blessed by the Order. But this gift came with expectations. The Golden Order demanded conformity, obedience, faith in the greater will's vision. It categorized beings into hierarchies, blessed and cursed, pure and impure, worthy and unworthy. Yet even a god needs mortal hands to enact divine will. Marika required a champion, a warrior capable of leading her armies and conquering the lands between in her name. She found that champion in Waralu, a warrior of extraordinary strength and savage ferocity. Waralu was a chieftain of the Badlands, a man who fought with the raw power of a beast, wrestling giants and crushing enemies with his bare hands. He was everything the refined Golden Order was not: primal, violent, untamed. Marika saw in Waralu not a barbarian to be civilized, but a force to be directed. So she offered him something unprecedented, the title of Elden Lord, the highest position a mortal could achieve, consort to a god and commander of her divine armies. But this elevation came with a condition. Waralu would need to temper his savage nature, to channel his violence into purpose. With the Erdtree firmly established, and its golden light beginning to spread across the lands between, Queen Marika the Eternal, now the central deity of this burgeoning faith, turned her attention to consolidating her power and eliminating any remaining threats to her nascent Golden Order. This period often referred to as the Golden Order Dawn, was characterized by an aggressive expansionist policy driven by Marika's unwavering belief in the Erdtree's supremacy and her divine mandate. One of the most significant challenges to Marika's dominion came from the fire giants, a formidable race inhabiting the frigid peaks of the mountain tops of the giants. These colossal beings, with their fiery beards and immense strength, worshipped a malevolent entity known as the Fell God, a primordial flame deity whose power rivaled even the Erdtree's nascent influence. The fire giants' very existence, their ancient rites, and their devotion to a rival god were anathema to the Golden Order. Their unyielding resistance and the destructive power of the Fell God's flame posed a direct threat to the Erdtree's expansion and Marika's authority. The ensuing conflict was a brutal and protracted war, a clash of elemental forces and clashing ideologies. The Golden Order, spearheaded by its formidable tarnished warriors and guided by Marika's divine will, marched into the treacherous mountains, determined to extinguish the Fell God's flame and subjugate its worshippers. The battles were fierce, fought amidst blizzards and volcanic eruptions, with the very landscape scarred by the immense power unleashed. It was during this cataclysmic struggle that Godfrey, first Elden Lord, solidified his legendary status. A warrior of unparalleled might and ferocity, Godfrey led the charge against the fire giants, his axe cleaving through their ranks, his roar echoing across the frozen wastes. His personal valor and strategic brilliance were instrumental in turning the tide of the war. In a climactic confrontation, Godfrey personally engaged the Fell God, a being of pure, destructive flame. The details of this epic duel are shrouded in myth and legend, but the outcome is clear. Godfrey, through sheer force of will and a strength that bordered on the divine, slew the Fell God. This monumental victory effectively ended the fire giants' reign, breaking their spirit and dismantling their ancient civilization. While a single fire giant was spared, cursed to forever tend the flame of the Fell God as a living monument to their defeat, their power was shattered and their threat to the Golden Order was neutralized. This triumph cemented Godfrey's position as Marika's consort and the undisputed champion of the Golden Order. With the fire giants vanquished, Marika's gaze turned towards another ancient power, the ancient dragons. These majestic, primordial beings, remnants of a bygone era, held dominion over the skies and possessed immense magical power derived from the very essence of the great tree before it became the Erdtree. Their leader, Placidusax, was a multi-headed dragon lord who ruled over a timeless domain. Unlike the fire giants, who actively opposed the Golden Order, the ancient dragons largely existed independently, their ancient ways predating even the Erdtree's emergence. However, their immense power and their potential to challenge the Golden Order's supremacy could not be ignored. Marika, ever pragmatic and strategic, sought to integrate them into her new world order rather than annihilate them entirely. The Golden Order waged a series of campaigns against the ancient dragons, showcasing its growing military might and the power of its faith. These conflicts were less about outright destruction and more about demonstrating dominance. The dragons, though powerful, eventually recognized the futility of prolonged resistance against the relentless expansion of the Golden Order. Faced with the overwhelming force of Marika's armies and the prospect of their complete eradication, many ancient dragons chose to swear fealty to the Erdtree. This was not a complete subjugation, but rather a pact, an agreement to coexist under the Golden Order's dominion, acknowledging its authority while retaining a degree of their ancient traditions. This period also saw the emergence of remarkable alliances between the Golden Order and certain ancient dragons, demonstrating the nuanced approach Marika often took in establishing her rule. One such dragon was Lanciax, a magnificent beast of immense power and wisdom. Unlike many of her kin who retreated into isolation or fiercely resisted, Lanciax befriended Godfrey's knights, fighting alongside them in various campaigns. Her presence on the battlefield, her lightning breath and formidable claws, provided invaluable support to the Golden Order's forces, showcasing the potential for cooperation between these seemingly disparate powers. Her bond with the knights, particularly with the valiant warriors of the Crucible Knights, was a testament to her unique character and her willingness to bridge the gap between ancient power and the new order. Even more significant was the relationship forged between another ancient dragon, Fortisax, and Godwyn the Golden, the firstborn son of Marika and Godfrey. Fortisax, a dragon of immense size and power, became the sworn brother of Godwyn. This was an unprecedented alliance, a deep personal bond that transcended species and solidified the integration of certain dragonic elements into the very fabric of the Golden Order. Their brotherhood symbolized a period of relative peace and cooperation between the Golden Order and the ancient dragons, a testament to Godwyn's charisma and Fortisax's loyalty. This alliance further cemented the Golden Order's influence, extending its reach even into the ancient, mystical realms of the dragons. During this era of expansion and consolidation, Marika and Godfrey's union bore fruit, producing 3 children who would play pivotal roles in the unfolding drama of the lands between. Godwyn, the valiant and charismatic firstborn, known as Godwyn the Golden. Morgott, the Omen King, cursed with the grotesque features of the omens, yet fiercely loyal to the Erdtree, and Mog, the Lord of Blood, another omen, who would eventually embrace a darker path. These children, the direct descendants of the first Elden Lord and Queen Marika, represented the nascent golden lineage, a bloodline destined to rule the lands between under the benevolent, or perhaps iron fist of the Erdtree. Their births marked the beginning of a new dynasty, a line of demigods who would inherit the power and responsibility of their divine parents. However, as the Golden Order ascended, it also sought to erase or redefine aspects of the past that did not align with its new doctrines. The Crucible, the primordial form of the Erdtree, representing the raw, undifferentiated life force that existed before the Erdtree's structured evolution, became a target of this revisionism. The Crucible, with its diverse and untamed aspects, such as horns, tails, and wings, was seen as chaotic and impure by the refined sensibilities of the Golden Order. Its aspects, once celebrated as signs of primal strength and connection to the very essence of life, were now suppressed and systematically demonized. Those who bore these crucible aspects, such as the omens, were cast out and reviled, their very existence a challenge to the Golden Order's idealized vision of perfection. This suppression was a deliberate act of cultural engineering, an effort to control the narrative of creation and establish the Erdtree as the sole, perfect source of all life. The raw, untamed power of the Crucible was deemed anathema. Its ancient truths, buried under layers of dogma and prejudice. As the Golden Order solidified its power and its doctrines, the Golden lineage, descended from Marika and Godfrey, began to flourish. Godwyn, Morgott, and Mog, along with their future siblings and descendants, formed the core of this new aristocracy, their divine blood granting them immense power and influence. Their presence further cemented the Golden Order's hold on the lands between, creating a stable, albeit increasingly rigid, social and political structure. This era, therefore, marked a period of immense transformation, a time when the foundational pillars of the Golden Order were laid, its enemies vanquished, its alliances forged, and its future rulers established. The lands between, under the golden light of the Erdtree, entered a new age, an age of order, expansion, and the undeniable dominance of Queen Marika's divine will. The stage was set for the golden age of the Erdtree, a period of unprecedented prosperity and stability, built upon the foundations laid during these formative years. But even in this golden dawn, the seeds of future conflict and hidden truths were already being sown, waiting for their time to blossom into chaos. Welcome back, weary traveler, to our soothing journey through the enigmatic timeline of Elden Ring. We now drift into the pre-shattering era, a time of unparalleled glory and burgeoning conflict, specifically the zenith of the Erdtree and the rise of the Carian dynasty. This period, following Marika's ascension and the Golden Order's foundation, marks a pivotal shift in the lands between, where the golden light of the Erdtree shone brightest, and new powers emerged to challenge, then intertwine with its dominion. As the Erdtree reached its full, majestic splendor, its grace and ethereal blessing flowed freely throughout the lands between. This divine favor, often manifesting as a golden glow or an inner conviction, guided the tarnished, those exiled from the lands between for reasons yet shrouded in mystery, back to their ancestral home. Though their explicit return was still a future event, the guiding light of the Erdtree was already a pervasive force, subtly shaping destinies and hinting at a grander purpose. This era was defined by the Golden Order, the religious and political doctrine established by Queen Marika the Eternal, who, as we discussed, ascended to godhood and became the vessel for the Elden Ring. Under her unwavering leadership, the Golden Order solidified its dominion, spreading its tenets of order, rebirth, and the sanctity of the Erdtree across the vast continent. Its influence was absolute, its power unchallenged, at least for a time. Yet even in the shadow of the colossal Erdtree, other powers were beginning to blossom. Far to the northwest, nestled amidst the shimmering lakes and ancient ruins of Lurnia, the Carian royal family established their formidable dynasty. Unlike the Golden Order's faith-based dogma, the Carians were masters of glintstone sorcery, a magical art drawing its power from the stars and the crystallized remnants of ancient knowledge found within the region's abundant glintstone deposits. Their capital, the Grand Raya Lucarian Academy, became a beacon of learning and arcane power, a stark contrast to the Erdtree's golden glow. This was not a mere magical school. It was the heart of a powerful political entity, a rival to the Golden Order's spiritual authority, even if their territories rarely directly overlapped in the early days. At the helm of this burgeoning power was Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, a figure of immense beauty and even greater magical prowess. Rennala was not merely a ceremonial leader. She was a sorceress of unparalleled skill, her power deeply intertwined with the celestial body she revered. Her mastery of lunar magic and her profound understanding of the cosmos made her a living legend, and under her guidance, the Carian royal family flourished, their influence radiating throughout Liurnia. Her connection to the moon was more than symbolic. It was a source of her power, a testament to the diverse forms of magic that existed outside the Golden Order's purview. But the lands between held secrets far older than even the Erdtree's current zenith. Beneath the surface world, a forgotten civilization, the Nox, had long existed. This ancient people, known for their intricate silver craftsmanship and their unique understanding of life and death, defied the Greater Will, the cosmic entity that bestowed the Elden Ring upon Marika. Their defiance, stemming from their desire to create their own gods and their own destiny, led to their banishment underground. Thus, the Greater Will, intolerant of any challenge to its authority, cast them down, leaving behind only enigmatic ruins on the surface, silent testaments to a once thriving culture. These ruins, scattered across the lands between, served as a haunting reminder of the consequences of opposing the cosmic order. In their subterranean exile, the Nox did not simply wither away. Instead, they adapted, thrived, and built magnificent, sprawling cities. The eternal cities of Nokron and Noxtella, carved into the very earth, became their new homes. These cities, bathed in an ethereal, artificial moonlight, were marvels of engineering and arcane artistry, a testament to the Nox's resilience and their enduring ambition. Within their depths, they continued their forbidden experiments, attempting to create their own sovereign, a being free from the influence of the Greater Will. Their very existence underground was a continuous act of defiance, a quiet rebellion against the dominant cosmic force. The growing power of the Carian royal family, a distinct magical tradition outside the Golden Order's direct control, eventually led to inevitable friction. The Golden Order, in its expansionist phase, sought to unify the lands between under its single banner. This ambition clashed directly with the independent spirit of the Carians. Thus, a devastating war erupted between the Carian royal family and the Golden Order. This was not a minor skirmish, it was a full-scale conflict, a clash of ideologies and magical traditions. Representing the Golden Order was Radagon, a formidable champion, a powerful warrior, and a devout follower of the Erdtree. He was a figure of immense strength and unwavering loyalty, the perfect embodiment of the Golden Order's might. The war raged across Liurnia, scarring its beautiful landscapes and claiming countless lives. Yet amidst the chaos and destruction, something truly extraordinary occurred. Radagon, the Golden Order's champion, and Rennala, the Queen of the Full Moon, found themselves drawn to each other. Their encounters on the battlefield, initially marked by fierce opposition, gradually transformed into something deeper. Perhaps it was the mutual respect for each other's power, or a shared weariness of the endless conflict, but their animosity gave way to an unexpected affection. This unlikely romance, a testament to the unpredictable nature of love, transcended the bitter war. Their burgeoning feelings led to a truce, halting the bloodshed and bringing a temporary peace to the war-torn region. This truce was not merely a cessation of hostilities. It was sealed by their marriage, an event that would forever alter the political and magical landscape of the lands between. The union of Radagon and Rennala, a champion of the Golden Order and the Queen of Glintstone Sorcery was a monumental occasion, symbolizing a temporary, fragile peace between two powerful, divergent forces. This marriage, however, would have far reaching consequences, shaping the destinies of their children and the very fabric of the lands between for millennia to come. The union of Rennala and Radagon, though initially a powerful alliance, would ultimately prove to be a temporary one. From their marriage, three remarkable children were born: Rykard, the eldest, a scholar, and later a blasphemous demigod; Ranni, a lunar princess and Empyrean with a destiny she would fiercely reject; and Radagon, a mighty general whose strength was legendary. These three offspring represented a potent blend of Carian sorcery and Golden Order faith, a testament to the brief but impactful era of cooperation between the two powers. However, the political landscape of the lands between was ever shifting, and the whims of the gods, or rather the will of Queen Marika herself, were paramount. Radagon, for reasons that remain shrouded in some mystery, though heavily implied to be at Marika's direct behest and tied to his own nature as a facet of her being, eventually abandoned Rennala and the Academy of Raya Lucaria. He was summoned to become Queen Marika's second consort, a move that solidified the Golden Order's dominion and further entwined the royal lineage. This departure left Rennala utterly heartbroken, a sorrow so profound it shattered her mind, leaving her a shell of her former brilliant self, forever cradling the amber egg that contained the great rune of the unborn, a symbol of her lost love and the unfulfilled potential of her children. Her once unrivaled magical prowess became erratic, her focus consumed by grief and the echoes of her past. The Carian royal family, though still powerful, lost a significant anchor with Radagon's departure, and the delicate balance of power in Liurnia began to subtly shift. With Radagon now by her side, Queen Marika entered a new phase of her reign, one that would bring forth two more demigods of immense significance. From their union, Marika and Radagon bore Miquella and Malenia, twin Empyreans. The term Empyrean is crucial here, denoting a demigod who has the potential to become a god, a vessel for the Elden Ring itself. This potential, however, came with its own set of profound burdens and curses. Miquella, despite his Empyrean status, was afflicted with an eternal childhood, a curse that prevented him from ever maturing physically. This seemingly innocuous affliction had profound implications for his ambitions. He sought not only to cure himself, but more importantly, to find a remedy for his beloved twin sister, Malenia, who suffered from an even more devastating malady. Miquella, driven by an unwavering love and a brilliant mind, dedicated himself to finding a cure for both their curses. He established the Erdtree, a sanctuary intended to nurture and cleanse, a testament to his benevolent, if ultimately tragic, aspirations. His efforts represent a significant departure from the direct dictates of the Golden Order, suggesting a nascent yearning for alternative paths to divine power and well-being. Malenia, the blade of Miquella, was an Empyrean born with the scarlet rot, a horrifying and debilitating affliction that would eventually bloom into a devastating plague. This curse, a manifestation of an outer god's influence, was a constant source of pain and weakness, yet it also imbued her with a terrifying power. Despite her suffering, Malenia developed into a formidable warrior, her skill with the blade unmatched, honed by a lifetime of battling her own internal torment. The scarlet rot, though a personal curse, had the potential to spread and corrupt the very fabric of the lands between, as evidenced by its later devastating impact on Caelid. Her existence and Miquella's tireless efforts to cure her highlight the inherent vulnerabilities and imperfections even within the divine lineage of the Golden Order. The very existence of such a potent curse within an Empyrean raised questions about the omnipotence and benevolence of the greater will itself. While Miquella and Millennia grappled with their unique curses, another Empyrean, Ranni, the daughter of Rennala and Radagon, was charting a very different course. Ranni, aware of her destiny as a potential god, fiercely rejected the path laid out for her by the greater will and the Golden Order. She desired true freedom, a future unburdened by the dictates of an outer god. Her ambition was to cast off the greater will's influence entirely and forge a new age, an age of stars, where the chill of the moon would guide the lands between. This radical ambition would eventually lead her to orchestrate a pivotal event that would irrevocably alter the course of history. Her rejection of her divine calling represents a powerful counter-narrative to the established order, a yearning for self-determination that would ultimately resonate with many who felt stifled by the Golden Order's rigid dogma. Her intellectual prowess, inherited from her mother, and her connection to the moon, a symbol of fate and destiny, made her a formidable force, even in her defiance. Amidst these unfolding sagas of demigods and their intertwined destinies, the established order of the Golden Age still held sway, but not without a significant shift in its foundational pillars. Godfrey, Queen Marika's first Elden Lord, the mighty warrior who had unified the lands between and conquered the giants, had fulfilled his purpose. With no more foes left to conquer, and perhaps a subtle manipulation by Marika herself, Godfrey was exiled from the lands between. Stripped of his grace and banished from the Erdtree, he became the first Tarnished. This act, seemingly a demotion, was in fact a deliberate long-term strategy by Marika. She sent Godfrey and his loyal followers away, knowing that one day, when the time was right, they would be called back. The Tarnished, individuals who had lost the grace of the Erdtree, were destined to return when the Elden Ring was shattered to mend it and become the next Elden Lord. This exile was not an end, but a prelude, a strategic maneuver by Marika to ensure the eventual restoration of the Golden Order, albeit through a new champion. Godfrey's departure marked a significant turning point, signifying the end of one era of martial dominance and the quiet preparation for another. Throughout this period, even with the emergence of the Empyreans and the strategic exile of Godfrey, the Elden Ring remained whole. Its power flowed unimpeded, nourishing the Erdtree and sustaining the Golden Order. Queen Marika, with Radagon as her consort, maintained her absolute dominion, and the Golden Order continued its zenith. This was an era of profound stability, outward prosperity, and the seemingly unchallenged authority of the Erdtree. However, beneath this veneer of perfection, the seeds of future conflict were already sown. The curses of Miquella and Millennia, Ranni's rebellious ambition, and Marika's own enigmatic plans for the Tarnished. The Golden Order, at its peak, was also unknowingly hurtling towards its inevitable downfall, a cataclysm that would shatter the Elden Ring and plunge the lands between into an age of chaos and war. The stage was set, the players in place, and the grand, tragic drama of the shattering was just on the horizon. And so, as the golden age of the Erdtree and the Carian dynasty reached its zenith, a shadow began to lengthen across the opulent lands between. Our timeline now brings us to a pivotal, cataclysmic period known simply as the Shattering. This era, marked by unfathomable tragedy and cosmic upheaval, irrevocably altered the very fabric of existence in this world. It is here, at the precipice of this cataclysm, that we witness the first true cracks in the Erdtree's golden facade, beginning with an act of unimaginable sacrilege and sorrow. The first demigod to fall, the first to truly taste death in a world seemingly untouched by its finality, was Godwyn the Golden. He was the beloved son of Queen Marika, the Eternal, a beacon of hope and strength, a paragon of the Golden Order. Yet his demise was not a simple death, but a grotesque perversion of it. On a night forever etched in infamy, Godwyn's soul was extinguished, yet his physical form remained, a chilling testament to a ritual gone horribly awry. This act, the assassination of a demigod, was unprecedented, a shockwave that reverberated through every corner of the lands between. The very concept of destined death, the natural end of all things, had been suppressed by Marika herself through the sealing of the rune of death. But now it had been unleashed in a manner most unnatural, most cruel. The instrument of this cosmic crime was the rune of death itself, or rather, a stolen fragment of it. This primordial power, once contained within the Elden Ring and guarded by Malekith, Marika's shadow, and the Black Blade, was pilfered from its sacred resting place. Its theft was not a random act of banditry, but a meticulously planned heist, born from a deep-seated desire for liberation. The mastermind behind this audacious plot was none other than Ranni the Witch, a demigod daughter of Radagon and Rennala, and a powerful Empyrean. Ranni, burdened by the greater will's predetermined path for her, sought to escape its influence, to cast off the shackles of fate and forge her own destiny. She understood that to truly be free, she needed to shed her flesh, to discard her corporeal form while preserving her spirit. The rune of death, when used precisely, offered this grim solution. Her ambition, therefore, directly led to the unspeakable tragedy that befell Godwyn. The actual execution of the assassinations, the grim work of extinguishing demigod souls, fell to a shadowy cadre known as the Black Knife Assassins. These mysterious figures were exclusively women, swift and silent, their blades imbued with the stolen power of the rune of death. Whispers and legends suggest they were Numen, the same ancient, otherworldly race from which Queen Marika herself is believed to have descended. Their Numen heritage, if true, adds another layer of complexity to the conspiracy, perhaps hinting at deeper, older resentments or allegiances that transcended even the Golden Order. On that fateful night of Black Knives, these assassins struck simultaneously across the lands between, targeting multiple demigods. While Godwyn was the most prominent victim and the only one whose body remained, other demigods, such as Ranni herself, who orchestrated her own body's demise to free her spirit, also met their destined death that night. The chilling precision of their strikes, the coordinated nature of the attacks, speaks to the immense planning and resources Ranni commanded, and the profound desperation that drove her. Godwyn's death, or rather his pseudo-death, had consequences far beyond the immediate grief and terror it instilled. Because his soul was destroyed but his body persisted, a ghastly corruption began to spread from his remains. His body buried deep within the roots of the Erdtree, became a focal point for a festering blight known as deathroot. This insidious corruption, a manifestation of his unnatural death, seeped into the very foundations of the Erdtree, twisting its roots and spreading across the lands between. It created the grotesque, those who live in death, undead creatures animated by a perversion of life and death, their bodies decaying yet still moving, a horrifying testament to the disruption of cosmic order. The Deathroot Blight was a visible, tangible sign that something fundamental had broken, a wound that continued to bleed across the land, affecting flora, fauna, and even the very spirit of the world. In the wake of Godwin's horrific demise and the subsequent chaos of the Night of Black Knives, Queen Marika the Eternal, the very deity of the Golden Order, committed an act that defied all understanding. She shattered the Elden Ring. This singular cataclysmic event ripped apart the very fabric of reality, plunging the lands between into an era of unprecedented turmoil and despair. The Elden Ring, the very embodiment of the Golden Order, the source of all grace and order in the world, was fractured into great runes, scattered across the land, each claimed by one of Marika's demigod offspring. The reasons behind her shattering remain one of the greatest mysteries of the lands between. Was it an act of profound grief, a mother's inconsolable despair over the loss of her beloved son, Godwin? Did she, in her anguish, lash out at the very source of her power, blaming the Golden Order or even the Greater Will itself for the tragedy that had befallen her family? Some scholars and historians of the lands between speculate that Marika's shattering of the Elden Ring was not merely an act of despair, but a deliberate, calculated rebellion against the greater will, the outer god that had bestowed the Elden Ring upon her in the first place. Perhaps Godwin's death was the final straw, revealing the inherent cruelty or indifference of the greater will's cosmic plan. Marika, a figure of immense power and enigmatic motivations, may have sought to dismantle the very system that had elevated her, believing it to be flawed or tyrannical. Her actions could be seen as a desperate attempt to break free from the predetermined path laid out by an unseen, all-powerful entity, even if it meant tearing apart the world she had helped to build. This theory gains traction when considering her later imprisonment within the Erdtree, a punishment seemingly meted out by the greater will for her transgression. Regardless of her true motivations, the shattering of the Elden Ring plunged the lands between into an age of unparalleled chaos and instability. The very laws of physics, the natural order of life and death, were thrown into disarray. The world, once united under the golden light of the Erdtree, splintered into warring factions, each demigod child of Marika and Radagon vying for control of the great runes, and with them the power to become the next Elden Lord. The once fertile lands became battlegrounds, bathed in blood and fire. The golden grace that once guided Tarnished, those exiled from the lands between, faded, and the guidance of grace itself became fractured and unreliable. The shattering was not merely a political or military conflict, but an existential crisis, a wound in the very soul of the world that would take centuries to heal, if it ever could. It was the end of an age and the beginning of a long, dark night for the lands between. The consequences of this single, pivotal act would ripple through time, shaping the destiny of every living being and setting the stage for the Tarnished's eventual return. The Golden Age was over, and a new, brutal reality had begun. As the Elden Ring shattered its fragments, the great runes found new hosts. Each of Marika's children, the demigods, claimed a piece, becoming what would forever be known as shard bearers. These weren't mere trinkets, but potent shards of the very concept of order, and their influence was profound. With each great rune absorbed, the demigods underwent a grotesque transformation, their bodies and minds warped to reflect their deepest ambitions and most crippling flaws. Radagon, already a towering figure, became a grotesque behemoth, his mind consumed by a singular, crushing gravity magic, a desperate attempt to hold the very stars in place. Millennia, afflicted by the scarlet rot from birth, saw her affliction intensify, her body becoming a living, breathing weapon of pestilence, yet her spirit remained unyielding, a testament to her twin brother, Michaela's unwavering devotion. Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, willingly offered himself to the god-devouring serpent, seeking ultimate power through forbidden rites, his form becoming an unholy union of man and beast. Mog, the Omen, already an outcast due to his Omen heritage, embraced the outer god of the formless mother, transforming into a harbinger of blood and madness, his great rune fueling his twisted desire for a new dynasty. Morgott, the Omen King, another Omen, paradoxically dedicated his life to protecting the very Erdtree that rejected him, his great rune a symbol of his unwavering loyalty, even as it marked him as an abomination. Godric, the Grafted, the weakest of the demigods, compensated for his lack of inherent strength by grotesquely grafting the limbs of defeated warriors onto his own body, a desperate, pathetic attempt to achieve power through accumulation, his great rune a symbol of his insatiable greed and insecurity. Ranni, though not a shard bearer in the traditional sense, orchestrated the Night of Black Knives, setting in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the fate of the lands between. Her ambition to sever ties with the greater will, a driving force behind her actions. Her great rune, the Rune of Death, once part of destined death itself, was stolen and used to assassinate Godwyn, the Golden. This grotesque empowerment, fueled by the great runes, inevitably led to conflict. A devastating war erupted among the demigods, each vying for ultimate control of the lands between. This wasn't a war of strategy and maneuver, but a brutal, desperate struggle for dominion, a clash of broken gods and shattered ambitions. The conflict, now infamously known as the Shattering, saw countless lives lost, entire regions laid waste, and the very landscape scarred beyond recognition. Caelid, once a vibrant land, became a blighted wasteland, forever tainted by the scarlet rot unleashed during the cataclysmic duel between Millennia and Radagon. Limgrave was torn apart by Godric's relentless grafting and the constant skirmishes with other factions. Liurnia of the Lakes, though somewhat protected by its magical barriers, still felt the tremors of war, its serene waters reflecting the chaos above. The once proud lineage of the Golden Order was fractured, its principles twisted and corrupted by the desperate actions of its former adherents. Amidst this maelstrom of destruction, a figure known as Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, began his meticulous quest, not for power, but for knowledge. He sought to gather every scrap of information about the Elden Ring, its shattered fragments, and the demigods who now wielded them. His ambition was not to rule, but to comprehend, to understand the intricate workings of the world and the divine forces that shaped it. He established the Round Table Hold, a sanctuary for tarnished, a place where knowledge was hoarded and shared, a desperate attempt to piece together the shattered narrative of the lands between. He sent his agents, the tarnished, across the land, instructing them to seek out the shard bearers, not to defeat them, but to learn their secrets, to understand the nature of their great runes, and to ultimately uncover the truth behind the Elden Ring's shattering. He believed that only through complete understanding could a path forward be forged, a way to mend the broken world. The war, however, reached a devastating stalemate. No single demigod possessed the strength or the cunning to claim dominion over the others. Their individual powers, amplified by the great runes, were immense, but also inherently contradictory, leading to an endless cycle of attrition. Millennia, despite her unmatched skill as a blade, was ultimately brought low by the Scarlet Rot, her duel with Radon ending in mutual destruction. Radon, though he held the stars in place, was ultimately consumed by madness and the rot, becoming a shadow of his former self. Godric, despite his grotesque grafting, remained a pathetic figure, easily defeated by any truly powerful foe. Mog and Rykard, consumed by their respective outer gods, became isolated figures, their ambitions confined to their own twisted domains. Morgoth, the Omen King, bravely defended the Erdtree, but his efforts were ultimately futile, a desperate holding action against an inevitable tide. Ranni, though powerful, chose a different path, seeking to escape the influence of the greater will entirely, rather than conquer the lands between. In the face of this unending conflict, a profound and terrifying silence descended from above. The greater will, the enigmatic outer god that had once bestowed the Elden Ring upon the lands between and guided its destiny, abandoned its creation. It withdrew its grace, its guiding hand, leaving the demigods to their endless, self-destructive conflict. The golden light that once illuminated the Erdtree and the hearts of the chosen flickered and died, replaced by an eerie, oppressive stillness. This abandonment marked a turning point, a definitive end to the Age of Grace, and a descent into a new era of despair. The demigods, once favored children, were now left to their own devices, their once divine lineage a curse rather than a blessing. The lands between, once a beacon of prosperity and order, became a desolate battleground, a testament to the destructive power of unchecked ambition and the tragic consequences of a shattered divine order. The very concept of a unified realm, once held together by the Elden Ring, was now a distant memory, replaced by a fractured reality where only endless conflict reigned. This profound abandonment, this divine withdrawal, solidified the stalemate, ensuring that the war would continue indefinitely, a tragic dance of broken gods in a world without a guiding hand. The echoes of the shattering, the cataclysmic war for the shards of the Elden Ring, resonated throughout the lands between, leaving an indelible scar upon the very fabric of reality. As we move into the post-shattering era, a period defined by war and decay, the once glorious realm descended further into chaos. The land itself, once vibrant and teeming with life, became a testament to the brutal conflict. Vast swathes of the lands between were ravaged by the incessant warring of demigods and their armies. Once fertile plains became barren wastelands, ancient forests withered and died, and the very air grew heavy with the stench of death and corruption. The very ground, in many places, became saturated with the lingering magic and destructive force of the battles, rendering it desolate and inhospitable. This era, a somber chapter in the history of the lands between, saw the once unified empire fracture not just politically, but geographically and ecologically. Amidst this widespread devastation, various demigods, each with their own ambitions and fears, sought to consolidate what little power remained. One such figure, a direct descendant of the revered first Elden Lord, Godfrey, was Godric the Grafted. Driven by a desperate and grotesque ambition to reclaim the strength of his ancestor, Godric fled to Limgrave, a region now largely devoid of strong leadership. There, in the shadow of the Erdtree, he began his horrifying practice of grafting. This wasn't merely a symbolic act. Godric literally severed the limbs of his defeated foes, both human and beast, and surgically attached them to his own body. He believed that by accumulating the strength of others, he could overcome his inherent weakness and ascend to a position of true power. Each new limb, each grotesque addition, was a testament to his ambition and his profound self-loathing. He sought to become a living embodiment of strength, even if that strength was a patchwork of stolen parts, a monstrous parody of the power he so desperately craved. His fortress, Stormvale Castle, became a grim monument to his grafting obsession, its ramparts lined with the discarded remnants of his victims, and its halls echoing with the screams of those undergoing his gruesome procedures. Meanwhile, in the academic heartland of Liurnia of the Lakes, Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon and the former consort of Radagon, retreated into a profound state of grief and isolation. The shattering had not only claimed her husband, who had abandoned her to become Marika's second consort, but had also fractured her family and the very order she had so carefully maintained. She sought refuge within the hallowed halls of the Grand Library of Raya Lucarian Academy, the very institution she had once championed. Surrounded by countless tomes of sorcerous knowledge and the quiet hum of arcane power, Rennala became consumed by her sorrow. Her once brilliant mind, though still capable of immense magical feats, was now clouded by an overwhelming melancholy. She spent her days clutching the amber egg that housed the great rune of the unborn, a gift from Radagon, endlessly attempting to rebirth her children, a futile endeavor that only served to deepen her despair. Her students, the Carian Knights and sorcerers of the Academy, continued to revere her, but her active leadership had waned, leaving the Academy in a state of suspended animation, its formidable defenses still intact, but its guiding light dimmed. Far to the east, in the arid wastes of Caelid, another demigod, Radon the Star Scourge, grappled with a cosmic burden. Having conquered the very stars themselves through sheer force of will and gravity magic, Radon had, in a sense, frozen time. He held back the stars, preventing their natural celestial movements. This seemingly benevolent act was, in fact, a desperate measure to prevent the fate of the Carian royal family, his mother Rennala's lineage, from unfolding. The Carian family, deeply intertwined with the study of the stars, believed their destiny was written in the cosmos. Radon, perhaps out of a misguided sense of duty or a profound love for his family, chose to defy this cosmic decree. By halting the stars, he believed he could halt the prophecies and prevent any foreseen doom from befalling his mother and siblings. This immense feat of gravity magic, however, came at a great cost. It demanded his constant attention and immense power, effectively anchoring him to Caelid and preventing him from actively participating in the further conflicts of the Shattering. His loyal Redmond Knights, once a fearsome fighting force, were now largely tasked with maintaining the defenses of Redmayne Castle and tending to their increasingly burdened general. The relative stability created by Radagon's cosmic intervention was, however, destined to be shattered by the arrival of another formidable demigod, Millennia, the Blade of Miquella. Driven by her unwavering devotion to her twin brother Miquella and a fierce determination to see him become the next Elden Lord, Millennia marched her elite Cleanrot Knights into the blighted lands of Caelid. Her objective was clear: to confront Radagon and reclaim his great rune, a crucial step in Miquella's grand plan to establish a new order. Millennia, herself afflicted by the debilitating scarlet rot, was a warrior of unparalleled skill and resolve. Her Cleanrot Knights, though few in number, were fiercely loyal and equally dedicated, having sworn an oath to protect their goddess even unto death, and to resist the encroaching rot themselves. Their journey through the war-torn lands between was a testament to their unwavering purpose, a stark contrast to the scattered and aimless forces of other demigods. The inevitable clash between these two titans, Millennia and Radagon, culminated in a cataclysmic battle within the Ionian Swamp, a vast, festering mire in the heart of Caelid. This was not merely a skirmish, it was a duel of demigods, a clash of wills and immense power that shook the very foundations of the land. Radagon, with his mastery over gravity, wielded colossal blades and summoned meteors from the sky, a whirlwind of destructive force. Millennia, with her peerless swordsmanship and the insidious power of the scarlet rot coursing through her veins, moved with a fluid grace that belied her deadly intent. The ground trembled, the skies roared, and the very air crackled with the raw energy of their conflict. The battle raged for an indeterminate period, each demigod pushing the other to their absolute limits. The Cleanrot Knights fought valiantly against Radagon's Redmayne forces, but the sheer power of their general's confrontation overshadowed all else. As the battle wore on, with neither demigod able to gain a decisive advantage, Millennia, pushed to the brink of defeat and succumbing further to the insidious influence of the scarlet rot, made a desperate and devastating choice. In a last, desperate act of defiance and a bid to secure victory, she unleashed the Scarlet Ionia. This was not merely an attack. It was a catastrophic explosion of concentrated scarlet rot, a living, breathing plague unleashed upon the battlefield. The Aeonian Swamp, already a place of decay, became the epicenter of this horrific detonation. The very air turned crimson, and the ground erupted with a virulent, corrosive blight. The Scarlet Aeonia was a weapon of last resort, a self-destructive power that consumed both friend and foe, leaving behind only a festering wasteland. The immediate aftermath of the Scarlet Aeonia's detonation was horrific. Millennia, the Blade of Miquella, having unleashed such a devastating power, inevitably succumbed to the very blight she commanded. Her body, already ravaged by the rot, was overwhelmed by its virulent explosion. She fell unconscious, her form now a vessel for the spreading pestilence. The scarlet rot, now unleashed without restraint, began its relentless march across Caelid. The region, already scarred by war, was transformed into a nightmarish landscape of crimson decay. Flora withered and died, fauna mutated into grotesque forms, and the very air became toxic. The rot, a living disease, spread like wildfire, infecting everything it touched. Kylid became a monument to millennia's desperate act, a blighted land where life struggled to survive, a testament to the destructive power of the scarlet rot and the tragic consequences of the demigods' endless war. This catastrophic event marked a turning point in the post-shattering era, further plunging the lands between into an abyss of despair and corruption. The devastating consequences of the shattering continued to ripple across the lands between, leaving no corner untouched by its ruinous touch. As the war raged, one of its most tragic victims was General Radagon, the Star Scourge. His valiant efforts to hold back the stars themselves, a feat of immense power and dedication, ultimately proved to be his undoing. During his climactic battle with Millennia, Blade of Miquella, at the climax of the Third Battle of Aeonia, she unleashed the Scarlet Ionia, a devastating bloom of the scarlet rot, an insidious affliction that devours flesh and mind alike. Radagon, despite his immense strength and resilience, was overwhelmed. The scarlet rot, a disease tied intrinsically to the outer god of rot itself, seeped into his very being, corrupting his body and shattering his mind. He became tragically a mindless beast, a colossal husk of his former self, left to wander the wailing dunes of Khalid, forever consumed by the incessant itch and decay of the rot. His once glorious army, dedicated to their general, remained by his side, tending to his monstrous form, a testament to their unwavering loyalty, even in the face of such profound tragedy. His fate served as a stark reminder of the destructive power unleashed during the shattering, a power that could even fell a demigod of his caliber. Amidst this spreading decay and despair, hope, albeit a twisted one, still flickered. Miquella, an Empyrean, one of the chosen few capable of becoming a god, possessed an unyielding love for his twin sister, Millennia. He dedicated himself to finding a cure for her scarlet rot, a task that proved to be beyond even his prodigious intellect and power. His efforts led him to attempt the creation of his own Erdtree, a living, growing sanctuary intended to nurture and protect, and perhaps to purge the rot from Millennia's body. The Erdtree, a counterpoint to the Erdtree, was Miquella's grand design, a symbol of his unwavering devotion and his desire to create a world free from the Golden Order's rigid dogma. He poured his very essence into its growth, even sacrificing his own adult form to remain in an eternal slumber, cocooned within the tree, believing this state would allow the Erdtree to reach its full potential. However, his noble endeavor was tragically cut short. Mohg, Lord of Blood, another demigod and a child of Marika, harbored his own dark ambitions. Driven by a desire to establish a new dynasty, one where he would rule alongside a god of his own making, Mohg infiltrated the nascent Erdtree. He stole Miquella's unalloyed body, still in its youthful, slumbering state, from its protective embrace. Mohg's intention was to raise Miquella to godhood, not through Miquella's own will or design, but through the insidious influence of the formless mother, an outer god of blood and depravity, whose power Mohg served. This abduction was a profound blow, not only to Millennia's hope for a cure, but also to Miquella's own vision for a more benevolent future. Mohg's actions represent a pivotal moment in the unfolding narrative, directly influencing the eventual state of the lands between and the challenges faced by the Tarnished. Meanwhile, another demigod, Rykard, Lord of Blasphemy, chose a path of radical defiance against the Golden Order. Unlike Miquella's attempt to create a new, benevolent order, Rykard sought power through absolute transgression. He deliberately fed himself to the god-devouring serpent, a colossal, ancient entity residing deep within Mount Gelmir. This act was not one of sacrifice in the traditional sense, but a calculated, horrifying merger. Rykard sought to become one with the serpent, to gain its immense primordial power, and in doing so, to transcend the limitations of the Golden Order and its rigid dictates. He believed that by consuming gods, he could acquire their strength and ultimately challenge the very fabric of the established order. This grotesque fusion transformed Rykard into a monstrous, blasphemous entity, a grotesque union of man and serpent, forever bound to the ambition of devouring all that stands in his way. His motivation stemmed from a profound disillusionment with the Golden Order, seeing it as corrupt and stifling. His actions, while horrifying, represent a desperate search for a new form of power, a rejection of the existing hierarchy, and a willingness to embrace the forbidden in pursuit of ultimate freedom and strength. The blasphemous nature of his transformation and his insatiable hunger for divine power made him a formidable and terrifying force, a living embodiment of the Shattering's destructive potential. As the demigods waged their wars and pursued their individual, often catastrophic ambitions, a faint glimmer of hope began to emerge from the periphery of the lands between. The tarnished, those who had lost the guidance of grace and were exiled from the lands between long ago, began to feel a familiar yet long forgotten pull. The grace of the Erdtree, though fading for many, began to stir within these exiles, calling them back to the fractured realm. This was not a universal call, nor was it a clear directive. It was a subtle, persistent nudge, an awakening of purpose in those who had been cast aside. The return of the tarnished signaled a new chapter, a potential turning point in the fate of the lands between. They were the outsiders, the ones without a clear allegiance to any of the warring factions, and as such, they possessed the potential to either mend the fractured world or plunge it further into chaos. Their return was a direct consequence of the shattering, a desperate gambit by the fading grace to find a champion capable of restoring order, or perhaps forging a new one. Amidst the returning tarnished, several enigmatic figures pursued their own distinct agendas, each seeking to shape the future of the lands between in their own unique and often unsettling ways. Fia, the deathbed companion, a mysterious woman who offered comfort and intimacy to those on the brink of death, harbored a profound and audacious ambition. She sought to birth a new age, an age where death itself would be freed from the Golden Order's rigid control. Her ultimate goal was to mend the Elden Ring with the mending rune of the Death Prince, a fragment of the rune of death, which had been stolen and sealed away. This would, in her vision, allow the true concept of death, the curse mark of death, to return to the lands between, freeing souls from the unending cycle of life and undeath enforced by Marika's Golden Order. Fia believed that this would bring a true form of peace, allowing souls to finally rest. Her methods, however, were unconventional and often unsettling, involving the cultivation of nascent deathroot and the embrace of those touched by the curse of undeath. Her motivations, while seemingly benevolent, were deeply intertwined with the forbidden aspects of death, challenging the very foundations of the Golden Order's understanding of life and mortality. In stark contrast to Fia's complex motivations stood the chilling figure of the Dung Eater, the Loathsome. This grotesque individual, a harbinger of pure defilement, sought to spread his abhorrent curse across the entirety of the lands between. The seedbed curse, a horrifying affliction that transforms its victims into grotesque, withered husks, was his weapon of choice. The Dung Eater believed that all life was inherently flawed and deserved to be defiled, to be made into an embodiment of his loathsome curse. His actions were driven by a profound nihilism and a desire to see all existence reduced to a state of utter degradation. He actively sought out victims, binding them with his curse and leaving behind the telltale seedbeds as a testament to his vile work. His presence represented the absolute nadir of the shattering's aftermath, a force of pure, unadulterated malice seeking to corrupt not just the physical world, but the very essence of life itself. He was a living embodiment of the decay and spiritual rot that had taken root in the lands between, a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity could sink in the absence of guiding grace and order. As these various factions and individuals pursued their divergent paths, the very heart of the lands between, the magnificent Erdtree, began to show undeniable signs of distress. Once a vibrant symbol of life and the Golden Order's benevolent rule, its golden glow began to dim, its leaves withered, and its once powerful grace began to recede. The constant wars, the unchecked ambition of the demigods, the spread of the scarlet rot, and the general decay of the land all contributed to its waning vitality. The Erdtree, intimately connected to Queen Marika and the Elden Ring, was a living embodiment of the established order. Its fading grace was a clear indication that the Golden Order itself was faltering, its power diminishing, and its hold over the lands between weakening with each passing day. The dwindling grace meant that fewer individuals were blessed with its guidance, and the world grew ever darker, more dangerous, and more desperate. The burning of the Erdtree, a catastrophic event that would occur later, was foreshadowed by this gradual decline, a slow, agonizing death of the very source of light and life in the lands between. The fading Erdtree served as a poignant symbol of the profound crisis that gripped the world, a world teetering on the brink of utter collapse, awaiting a champion strong enough to either restore its former glory or forge a new destiny from its ashes. And so, with the lands between plunged into an eternal twilight, the stage was set for a new chapter, one that would unfold in the present day, the era of the Tarnished's journey. From the ashes of the shattering, a glimmer of hope, or perhaps a cruel jest of fate, emerged. The Tarnished, individuals once exiled from the lands between for reasons lost to the mists of time, individuals who had lost the golden hue of grace in their eyes, were now called back. This wasn't a universal summons, but a specific, undeniable pull, a whisper of guidance that stirred within their very being. Grace, the divine blessing of the greater will, the outer God that once bestowed its favor upon the Golden Order, now beckoned these outcasts home. It was a paradox, a reversal of fortune that promised either salvation or further damnation. The guidance of grace, an invisible, intangible force, manifested as a golden light, visible only to the Tarnished themselves. It was a silent compass, always pointing towards a singular, monumental objective: to seek the Elden Ring, the very heart of the Golden Order's power, and in doing so, to become the Elden Lord. This wasn't merely a title, but a destiny, a responsibility to mend the fractured world and restore a semblance of order, or perhaps to reshape it entirely. The Elden Ring, shattered into great runes by Marika, had become the prize in a brutal war, and now the Tarnished were its newest contenders. Our journey, the journey of our Tarnished, begins in a place of stark contrast and immediate peril, the Chapel of Anticipation. This dilapidated structure, perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the churning sea, serves as an abrupt reintroduction to the lands between. The very air here is thick with a sense of decaying grandeur, a prelude to the ruin that permeates the entire realm. It is here, in this crumbling sanctuary, that the Tarnished awaken, often disoriented and weaponless, thrust directly into a confrontation that underscores the brutal reality of their return. Almost immediately, they encounter the grafted scion, a grotesque amalgamation of flesh and steel, a product of the horrific grafting experiments pioneered by Godric the Grafted. This creature, a multi-limbed monstrosity wielding twin blades, serves as an early, unforgiving test, a brutal reminder of the power and depravity that now infest the lands between. For many Tarnished, this encounter is a swift, ignominious end, a stark demonstration that their return is no gentle homecoming. However, for those who persevere, or perhaps are simply fortunate enough to be resurrected by the guidance of grace, the true journey begins. Following this initial, often fatal encounter, the Tarnished are ferried by a spectral boat to the shores of Limgrave. This expansive, verdant region, characterized by rolling hills, ancient ruins, and towering arch trees, is the starting point of their arduous quest. Limgrave, while seemingly idyllic in parts, is a land scarred by war and teeming with dangers. Wandering soldiers, monstrous beasts, and the ever-present threat of the demigods' influence make every step a perilous one. It is here, amidst the decaying beauty, that the Tarnished truly begin to grasp the scale of the task ahead. The world is vast, interconnected, and relentlessly hostile. The initial hours in Limgrave are often characterized by a sense of isolation and vulnerability. The guidance of grace, while present, does not offer explicit instructions, only a direction. It is at the gatefront ruins, a crumbling testament to a forgotten conflict, that a pivotal encounter takes place. Here, the Tarnished meet Melina, a mysterious maiden with a veiled eye and an air of quiet determination. Melina, herself an enigmatic figure with a hidden past and a burning purpose, offers an accord. She proposes to serve as the Tarnished's maiden, a role crucial for their advancement. In exchange for guiding them to the Erdtree, the colossal golden tree that dominates the skyline of the lands between and is intrinsically linked to the Elden Ring, Melina asks only that the Tarnished take her to the foot of the Erdtree. This pact is more than a simple alliance. It is the key to unlocking the Tarnished's true potential. With Melina by their side, the Tarnished gain the ability to level up, to convert the runes, the fragments of life and power dropped by defeated foes, into strength, vigor, and other attributes. This mechanic, central to the progression of any aspiring Elden Lord, allows the Tarnished to grow in power, to adapt to the increasingly formidable challenges they face. But Melina's gift extends beyond mere statistical improvement. She also bestows upon the Tarnished the ability to summon Torrent, their spectral steed. Torrent, a loyal and swift companion, is not merely a mode of transportation. This ethereal horse, capable of double jumps and disappearing at will, becomes an invaluable asset in traversing the vast and dangerous landscapes of the lands between, allowing for quicker escapes from overwhelming threats and access to previously unreachable areas. The bond with Torrent, a silent but profound connection, provides a much needed sense of companionship in a desolate world. As the Tarnished grow in strength and understanding, their path inevitably leads them to Stormvale Castle, the imposing fortress that dominates western Limgrave. This stronghold is the domain of Godric the Grafted, one of the demigods, a direct descendant of Marika and Godfrey, and a grotesque figure infamous for his practice of grafting the limbs of defeated warriors onto his own body in a desperate attempt to gain power. Godric, though a lesser demigod in the grand scheme of things, is a formidable opponent, a brutal warlord who embodies the depravity that has taken root in the lands between. His defeat is a monumental achievement, a true test of the Tarnished's burgeoning strength and skill. Upon vanquishing Godric, the Tarnished claim their first great rune, a shard of the shattered Elden Ring. This act is a powerful symbolic victory, a tangible step towards becoming Elden Lord, and it signals to the other demigods that a new, formidable contender has entered the fray. Throughout this initial phase of the Tarnished's journey, the broader political and military landscape of the lands between remains in a state of perpetual stalemate. The various factions and demigods, each wielding their own fragment of the Elden Ring, remain locked in their struggles, their ambitions, and grievances fueling an endless cycle of conflict. Godric, despite his defeat, was merely one piece of a much larger, more intricate puzzle. His half-siblings and other powerful figures, such as Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, and Radagon, the Star Scourge, continue to hold sway over their respective domains, their agendas often clashing, their armies perpetually at war. The Tarnished's arrival, while significant, is initially just another ripple in the vast, turbulent ocean of the lands between. The demigods, consumed by their own power struggles and fractured ambitions, are largely unaware of the silent, determined figure gathering strength in the shadows, a figure destined to either mend their broken world or shatter it further. This intricate web of alliances and animosities, of ancient grudges and desperate power grabs, is the backdrop against which the Tarnished's journey unfolds, a journey that has only just begun. Continuing our journey through the present day, the Tarnished, having navigated the treacherous waters of Lurnia and faced the sorrowful Rennala, Queen of the Full Moon, now turn their gaze eastward. This path leads to Caelid, a land scarred beyond recognition. Here, the vibrant greens and blues of Lurnia give way to a grotesque palette of putrid reds, festering purples, and sickly yellows, all testament to the devastating impact of the scarlet rot. This insidious affliction, a manifestation of an outer god of decay, has transformed Caelid into a blighted wasteland, its flora twisted into grotesque fungal growths, and its fauna mutated into aggressive, disease-ridden monstrosities. The very air hangs heavy with spores, a constant reminder of the pervasive corruption. It is here that the Tarnished witness the tragic aftermath of a battle that forever altered the lands between, the duel between Millennia, Blade of Miquella, and General Radagon, Starscourge. Radagon, once a proud and mighty demigod, revered for his mastery of gravity magic and his unwavering loyalty to his steed, Leonard, now wanders Caelid a shadow of his former self, driven mad by the scarlet rot that festers within him. His mind, once sharp and strategic, is now consumed by an insatiable hunger and a primal rage, a horrifying testament to the rot's power. The Tarnished, guided by the whispers of the Two Fingers and the subtle machinations of Ranni the Witch, are compelled to confront this fallen hero. The Radagon Festival, a grim spectacle orchestrated by Jaren, the witch hunter, gathers warriors from across the lands between, not in celebration, but in a desperate attempt to grant Radagon a warrior's death, and crucially, to break the seal he holds upon the stars. Radagon, in his madness, had used his immense gravitational power to halt the very cosmos, preventing the natural progression of fate and the influence of celestial bodies like the moon. The ensuing battle is a maelstrom of gravity magic, colossal sword swings, and the desperate heroism of the Tarnished and their allies. Upon Radagon's defeat, a cataclysmic event unfolds. The seal on the stars shatters, and the heavens themselves seem to weep, unleashing a meteor shower upon the lands between. One such meteor, a colossal fragment of rock and starlight, cleaves a path through the earth, creating a gaping chasm in Limgrave, a direct route to the subterranean city of Nokron, Eternal City, a place long hidden from the surface world. This act, while seemingly destructive, is a pivotal moment, opening new pathways and revealing ancient secrets. With the stars unbound and new paths revealed, the Tarnished journey to the Altus Plateau, a land of golden light and ancient ruins, accessible either by the grand lift of Dectus or through the treacherous ruin-strewn precipice. Here, the Golden Order's influence is still palpable, despite the ongoing decay. The plateau leads directly to Leyndell, royal capital, a city of monumental architecture, gleaming gold, and a pervasive sense of melancholy. It is within Leyndell's gilded walls that the Tarnished confront Morgott, the Omen King, a demigod who, despite his cursed birth as an omen, fiercely defends the Erdtree and the Golden Order. Morgott, a figure of profound tragedy, has been cast out and reviled for his omen lineage, yet he remains loyal to a system that rejected him. His fight is not one of malice, but of duty and a desperate, heartbreaking love for a world that never truly loved him back. His defeat marks a significant step, but it also reveals a deeper truth. The Erdtree itself, the very symbol of the Golden Order and the source of its power, is impenetrable. A thorny barrier, a manifestation of Marika's will, or perhaps a consequence of the Elden Ring's shattering, prevents entry. It is at this point that the mysteries of the past, long shrouded in myth and fragmented prophecies, begin to unravel with greater clarity. The true nature of Marika's actions, her motivations for shattering the Elden Ring, and the complex interplay of the outer gods in shaping the destiny of the lands between become clearer, though never fully transparent. We learn of the greater will, the dominant outer god, which established the Golden Order and bestowed the Elden Ring upon Marika. We also learn of other outer gods, such as the Formless Mother, the source of Mog, Lord of Blood's power, and the aforementioned outer god of decay, responsible for the scarlet rot. The Tarnished come to understand that the Erdtree's burning is not merely a destructive act,